What's up, everybody? Appreciate you joining in with us right here on Thursday. That's right. I say Thursday because this last week and a half has been one gigantic blur. No, it's not Monday. I know yesterday kind of felt like a Sunday, but no, it is instead Thursday here. Appreciate you joining us. Hopefully by this point, the New Year's hangover has come and gone, is dissipated a little bit. I can tell you who's not feeling hungover. Actually, check that. Probably still are from celebrating so much last night. And that's Ohio State fans. Because holy hell. What we saw yesterday was a team that I think is unbeatable. With what Ohio State did, if they are able to play the way they did against both Oregon and Tennessee so far, there's no one left in this field that's beating them. And forget beating them. There's no one left in this field, I think, that's keeping it within 2 touchdowns. They are proving to you right now in these last 2 games, they are head and shoulders better than every other team remaining in the college football playoff. I don't want to hear about Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, Penn State. None of those teams, I think, right now can hold a candle to what the Buckeyes are doing. If they are able to stay consistent these next 2 games, the way they have these last 2 games, they are raising the national title trophy. There's no doubt about it. They are playing like the best team in the country. And we knew, right, before the year, they had the most talent in the country. With the roster, with the transfer portal, with the guys they're able to retain on defense from last year, they came in to this 2024 season as the most talented team in the country. And I think for for really the entirety of the regular season, the frustrating part of the Ohio State is they never looked at any point like the best team in the country. There's not one game, there's not one moment where you said, oh, Ohio State, they look head and shoulders better than everybody else. We've said that about Georgia at times early in the season. We said it about Alabama. We said it about Oregon, Texas. We never once in the regular season said that about Ohio State. And that's, I think, the large frustration maybe towards Ryan Day for a large part of this year is he has all this talent and is not having them live up to the expectations and live up to the potential that the stars on the paper say, that the stats say going to this year. But I think what a great coach does, what a great team does, is play their best football at the end when it matters the most. And there's no debating, there's no arguing. Say what you want about the Michigan game. That now is long in the rearview mirror. What this team has done against Tennessee and now against Oregon, the best team in the country, it's indisputable. They are going to win the national championship pretty easily as long as they can continue this level of play, in large part because you see how well this team is playing. I think for me, the last 2 games, it starts with their defensive line. Like, that's, to me, where you're really seeing a difference with this Ohio State team in the regular season compared to the postseason. This defensive line, led by guys like Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, they are raining hell, not havoc, true hell right now on these offensive lines they faced from Tennessee and Oregon. And look what they did in this game. 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. The rushing stats are a little misleading because when you look at it in the box score, it's 28 rush attempts for negative 23 yards, which is insane. But in college football, they put the sack yardage in with the rushing totals. So when you take out the sack yardage and just look at actual rush attempts, Oregon, who has been one of the best rushing teams in the country, they've been averaging 180 yards on the ground since the last time they played Ohio State. Mind you, that was in early October. So for 2 months, they've been basically averaging 180 yards on the ground per game. They were held to 20 rush yards on just 16 carries. And what's so impressive about what Ohio State's able to do is that they tormented an offensive line for Oregon that is one of the best in the country. They were Joe Moore Award finalists. They were stout. And we saw in the first game, one of the biggest deciders in Oregon beating Ohio State back in October was the fact that they kept Dylan Gabriel clean in the pocket. 0 sacks and did not get a lot of pressure on him really at any point in the game. And that allowed Gabriel to sit back there, pick that defense apart. He threw for 341 yards, had 2 passing touchdowns, and was just sitting back there like a damn surgeon. And so when you look at how well Oregon's been able to run the ball, when you look at how good this offensive line is, I came into this game expecting Oregon to be able to do the same thing they did against Ohio State the first time around. And credit to them because they did not really change much. You know, Jim Knowles, they blitzed the first time 25% of the time. They're not a big blitzing team. They didn't really blitz in this game. That was just sheer determination and domination from guys like we just mentioned, Sawyer, JTT, and Tyleik Williams. They just took over the game, took it over. And so they got pressure on Gabriel, never made him comfortable, flushed him out of the pocket. And when you're doing that with 4 guys, it felt like every single time ESPN kind of did that camera behind Gabriel, we can kind of see the defense. But every time they talked about Dillon Gabriel holding onto the ball, getting flushed out, throwing it away, you look down the field, nobody's open. Why? Because when Ohio State's not blitzing, you can drop 7 guys and you can roam a guy like Caleb Downs all over the field who just felt like he was a magnet to the football every play he has. And so that was the front 4. That was, to me, the biggest key in this game. I thought if Ohio State could not generate pressure, which I did not think they were going to be able to do in this one, they had no chance to win. And to their credit, boy, did they generate pressure. And that was right there where the game was won. The front 4 of the Buckeyes. And it wasn't just this game where they kind of came out of nowhere. All right, now you look at what they did these 2 playoff games. They are right now destroying offenses and winning the game right there on those front 4. Look at the combined stats between Tennessee now and Oregon. They have 12 sacks, 19 tackles for loss in 2 games. I don't know who's blocking them. Texas has a good veteran offensive line. Penn State's offensive line is playing really well right now. Notre Dame's offensive line has been bulldozers all season long. But you look at what they did against a Tennessee team that's been able to run the ball all season long, and against, again, one of the best offensive lines in the country in Oregon. There's not an offensive line, I think, that can contain this front 4 of Ohio State. They are led by their defense. The defense sets the tone. They have good secondary players when they're not on an island. They were on an island a lot in the first matchup, not so much on this one at all. And so when you look at the key to Ohio State, the path here, it starts with the front 4 and how unblockable they have been. They have set the tone. And again, as long as they can continue to, number 1, stay healthy. Number 2, just keep up this consistency. They don't have to take it to another level. They're at right now top gear. If they could just keep on repeating these 2 performances, again, there's not a team in this field left that's going to beat them. I don't know if there's even a team left in this field that can keep it competitive. They are just right now that good, head and shoulders better than everybody else. Ohio State, I think by far should be the favorite to win the national title. I think by far they are the best team left remaining. They are playing the best football when it matters the most. They are dominant as hell. And it's also not a coincidence, and this was to me one of the most maddening parts of Ohio State's regular season. It's not a coincidence that their offense is clicking and borderline unstoppable when they get their true freshman wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, involved. It was criminal at times how good this guy is and how infrequently, I should say, they got him the ball. When you just look at the box score, right, there's been one game leading into the Rose Bowl where Jeremiah Smith had 7 or more catches. Think of one game where he had 7 or more catches in the regular season. Unfathomable. That we saw it in the Rose Bowl. It doesn't matter if you have 1 guy, 2 guys, bracket him. You throw it up, he's coming down with it. He is unguardable. Once he's in the open field, he's gone. You can't tackle him. He gets a hand on the ball, whether it's a fingertip, 2 fingers, 1 hand, doesn't matter. He's coming down with it. And you saw in this game, Ohio State early, and to their credit, often got him the football, and guess what happens? Great things. Not good things happen. Great things happen because this guy is truly, as a true freshman, one of the best players in all of college football. 7 catches in this game for 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I could argue again, he should have a lot more catches. He should have had easily 10, 11, 12. I get the second half. Okay, you're more worried about the clock than you are, just getting points on the board. So you can kind of say you took the foot off the gas a little bit. But when this guy's involved, there's no stopping this Ohio State offense. There's not. And now in the 2 playoff games, they finally, I don't know why it took Ryan Day so long. And maybe the Michigan game here truly served as a wake-up call when he had a big first half and was targeted just twice. In the second half of that Michigan loss, Ohio State coaches Day and Chip Kelly realized, maybe if we get that number 4 guy the ball more often, good things will happen. And now in the 2 playoff games he's played, Jeremiah Smith has a combined 291 yards, 4 touchdowns. Yeah, not bad. He should be getting the ball still early and often here these next 2 games. There's no defense that can stop him. No defensive back, no scheme that can slow him down. You continue to get him the ball again. Ohio State's going to put up some big-time points here. And I want to give credit to Will Howard. Because I'll be honest, going into this year, I did not buy into Will Howard at all. I did not think he was an upgrade over Kyle McCord. I really didn't. I thought Will Howard was just going to be another guy that comes in, is uplifted and propped up by the talent around him. But when you, in those, those games, those drives where you really need your quarterback to uplift everybody else, much like McCord, I think he was going to be able to do so. And to Will Howard's credit this season, he has proved me wrong almost every time. Will Howard is a big game quarterback. I don't want to hear about Michigan. He played poorly, so does everybody else. But look now, against what has been 5 top 10 teams he's played so far this season. We look at the 3 top 5 teams in Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, and then obviously Tennessee now in a rematch against Oregon. He's combined for 13 total touchdowns and 3 picks. He makes good decisions. He's accurate with the football. He doesn't make too many bad plays. I mean, in this game, 319 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He tormented. The shame about Will Howard's performance in the first Oregon game is that everybody remembers one play, the slide, right, with no time left, and then how that game ended. But the shame of it is he played a great game up to that one point. He was outstanding. I thought he had the best game of his career in that game with how efficient he was passing the football, over 300 yards. The run game was truly not that great for Ohio State in that game, and the defense was not very good. He was the only reason why the Buckeyes even had a chance late in that game to win. And it's a shame that his great game was overshadowed by, again, one mistake that I don't even put totally on him, but he's going to get a lot of the blame for it. And he has proven to you now since that game against against Penn State, after throwing an early pick 6, he battled back and was mentally tough enough and resilient enough to lead Ohio State to a gritty win on the road in Happy Valley. Against Indiana, efficient. Offense wasn't great, but he made the smart plays, did not really give the Hoosiers any sort of chance to come back in that game. And then against Tennessee was just workmanlike. And now against Oregon, he was just surgical in the rematch. Surgical. Great play calling by Chip Kelly. Got a lot of guys open. Found Jeremiah Smith. What a shot. Good things happen when you find number 4. Mecca Buka, Howard had a great pass to Buka on that touchdown, take it 14-0 early. He is a big game quarterback. And that's a guy that, looking at these next 2 games here for Ohio State against Texas and then make the national title game against whoever they play, Penn State, Notre Dame-Georgia, he's not the weak link. And they most likely have the quarterback edge. Maybe Drew Allert's a little bit of a wash. I like Allert. He'll get to him in a little bit. But Will Howard and Ohio State will have the quarterback edge in almost every single matchup they have remaining. Credit to Will Howard, big game quarterback. He's a big reason why Ohio State is now 2 wins away from the national title and playing at an outrageous pace right now, playing like the best team in the country. Last thing I want to get to you when it comes to at least Ohio State. Shout out to their offensive line, who's had a ton of injuries. They lost their left tackle. They lost their center. They have now guys playing out of place. And you would have never known this was an offensive line that was missing 2 key starters. And really, when you look at it, had 3 other guys playing out of position. They dominated what has been a solid Oregon defensive line all season long. I mean, they ran for 181 yards on the ground, almost 6 yards per carry, and did not allow a sack. Did a great job protecting Will Howard. And in these 2 playoff games, because they ran the ball well against Tennessee as well, which Tennessee is a very stout and tough defense, that Ohio State offensive line, since Michigan, has done a great job of bouncing back, imposing their will, and being a catalyst for this Ohio State offense. Will Howard has been great. Jeremiah Smith has been great. But this run game for Ohio State has provided balance and has allowed a lot of these opportunities for Howard and these receivers to be open because defenses have to respect the run. Something that was not the case against Michigan, something that was not the case against Oregon, something that was not the case even in a win against Nebraska earlier this season, where they really struggled and was able to barely get lucky and win that game. Ohio State's offensive line has been tremendous. I don't want that to go unnoticed here. But let's talk about this man who has been highly criticized. I feel like the discussions around him have been just moronic, frankly. And now you see how Ryan Day has his team cooking, just smoking Oregon in the rematch. Ryan Day is the second best coach in all of college football right now, behind only Kirby Smart. That to me is unassailable. Like, there's no name you can mention to me right now that you could argue is a better coach than Ryan Day. Kalen DeBoer, Day's never had 3 losses in a regular season the way DeBoer has this year at Alabama. Dabo Swinney has 2 national titles, yes. Right now, Clemson is backsliding. No one really looks at Clemson the same way they did 5 years ago. Day has surpassed, I think, Dabo, even with the 2 national titles on Dabo's resume. Like Dan Lanning, I think Dan Lanning, you could probably argue, was the second best coach in college football going into this game behind Kirby. Well, his team just got absolutely worked. And I think Ohio State and getting revenge in the rematch here, I think Day slides ahead of them, especially when you consider now the body work outside of just this season, with Day making the college football playoff now 4 times in his career. Making a national title game back in 2020, stuff that Lanning has not done before. He has the previous resume overall, and now has been able to get revenge on the guy that beat him earlier this season and was able to get revenge and beat the best team in college football this season. I think that there's no coach outside of Kirby right now that is better than Ryan Day. He deserves his flowers. If you want to fire him after every single loss and say he sucks as a coach, can't win a big game after Michigan, you have to acknowledge, well, this guy beats everybody else. And I think the Michigan thing and Day's coaching otherwise are 2 separate stories. He has a Michigan problem. There's no doubt about it. But here's the good news for Michigan. Here's the good news for Buckeye fans. And I think this is something that's lost too often that has to be remembered. Michigan no longer, in this expanded playoff format, beating Michigan is no longer a prerequisite to winning a national title. In this 120-plus year history of that storied rivalry, that was the case for 98% of the rivalry, where you had to be Michigan or vice versa. If you're Michigan, had to beat Ohio State if you had any hope of winning a national title that year. Well, now in a 14 playoff, and especially in a 12-team playoff, that's not the case. You don't have to beat your rival in order to attain your top goal, which is winning the national championship. So Ryan Day has a Michigan problem, yes, and we'll figure that out, and we'll come to grips with that again next year in late November. But that is not preventing Ohio State from winning a national championship and having their goals still in front of them. And we are seeing that now play out in front of our eyes. And so, yeah, I would love to have Ryan Day as a coach. Again, this is a guy that outside of Michigan beats everybody. Has 1 loss in his career in the Big Ten. And even in the playoff, he had a blowout loss to Alabama in 2020 in which Alabama blew out everybody. So, okay, fine, that happens. That was just an unstoppable Alabama team that year that went on to win the national title. But look at, he lost a heartbreaker to Clemson when they had Trevor Lawrence back in 2019, was able to extract revenge the next year in 2020. And then the Georgia loss they had back in the Peach Bowl a few years ago, they're 1 made kick away from being the national championship game against TCU and probably winning the national title. So Ryan Day is 1 made kick away from having a ring on his finger, beating at the time we thought what was an impenetrable, unbeatable Georgia team in 2022. The guy is competitive or beats every team he plays, not named Michigan. Give him his respect. He just got Ohio State to the Final Four while having the hardest path to do so. No other team in this field had to go through the likes of Tennessee and Oregon to get to the Final Four. Not only did he get there, he outscored those 2 opponents by a combined score of 83-38. And now, again, I think they're the favorite to win it all. Day deserves a lot of credit. He gets a lot of criticism and wants to get run out of town by every Ohio State fan every time they play out into their competition or lose to Michigan. The dude is a great coach. Second best coach in college football. No one wants to fire a lot of people. Oh, apologies to Ryan Day. All right. Before we move on here, let's get to Texas. I do want to quickly look at Oregon. Where does Oregon go from here? This is a gut punch here for Dan Lanning. They're going nowhere. Look, they have good recruits. They get a lot of guys in the transfer portal while they're losing a lot this upcoming offseason to the NFL draft and graduation. They are reloading, not rebuilding. Oregon's going nowhere. With that said, this feels like a wasted opportunity. Again, we could talk about the playoff format, how they got screwed. Penn State played Boise State, and Oregon, being a Big Ten champion, had to play Ohio State. I get it. And we could talk about it. Look, I'm with you. Like, that talk has been out for weeks now. I'm not going to just reiterate it. Reseeding, bare minimum, has to happen. If not, how you give out the buys. I think that will be fixed this offseason. I think we will see a slight adjustment. I'd probably go with the top 4 teams getting a bye, regardless of if you win your conference championship or not. I think that's ultimately what we'll see happen. And that could prevent another mismatch like this again, where if you're Oregon, you end up playing the best team in the country as your first game in the quarterfinal. I get it. But with that said, this to me felt like a blown opportunity for Oregon just because of how well they played all season long. In a year of parity, in the year of inconsistency, where no team from week 1 to week 14 played well all the way through and didn't have a rough patch. Oregon is the only team that really did not have a rough patch, where I thought truly maybe outside of the Wisconsin game in November, all they did was kept going up. The arrow kept pointing up. They kept getting better and improving each and every week. They're getting healthier towards the end. They were playing better. They were improving. They were the one constant in a year filled with parity and chaos. And so when there's really no other team that I thought that was kind of on their level with how consistent and talented they were playing, they should have, like, this was their best chance to win a national title, I think, ever. And I know they made the national title game a decade ago against Ohio State, and they were 1 win away. This, though, to me, felt like their best chance to win a championship in their school's history, and they couldn't get it done. It sucks. I thought they had the talent at quarterback, at receiver. Even with how well Ohio State played, I thought Oregon had the answers going into this game to be able to sweep the Buckeyes and move on to the semifinals. And I think, again, have a big mismatch against Texas in their favor. And then I think would be the favorites to beat Penn State, Notre Dame, or Georgia as well. That was one where I think if you're a Duck fan, this one's going to sting for a while. I think sting worse than the Ohio State game, again, back in 2014. Sting worse than even the Washington Pac-12 championship game last year, in which it felt like that they were a shoo-in to go win the Pac-12 and make a run deep in the college football playoff. Blown opportunity. Blown opportunity. I thought they had the horses. They had the everything you need to win a national title they had this year, and they just got absolutely pantsed. Absolutely pantsed. This is not an excuse. I think it is reality, though. I think the bye had something to do with their slow start, in which Ohio State jumped them 34-0. It's not the reason why they lost. Absolutely not. But I think you're lying to yourself if you are trying to say the bye had zero impact on this game. Oregon had 25 days between the Big Ten title game and this game right here. That's over 3 weeks to, like, that's, think about it this way, right? Football is about routine. Each week you play the game on Saturday. Okay, you recover on Sunday. Now it's like, all right, now we're back to getting ready for our next opponent. And it's a cycle each and every week. Well, now all of a sudden you break that cycle because leading up to the biggest game of the year, you have a 3-week break, almost a 4-week break that you are never going to have once training camp starts. Like, you never have that long of a break between games, a break between competitive opportunities. And so I don't care, look, I'm not saying, again, it's the reason why they lost. But I think it is a factor when you come out of the gate slow and you see how well Ohio State was clicking, because Ohio State played a game 10 days ago. They were used to it. They bounced back. They had the competitive juices flow, and they're able to get into a rhythm quicker. I think that a large part of that first quarter, Oregon was trying to knock off the rust, trying to get back in the swing of things. It's been a long time since they played. And I think when you look at the bye system, sure, it's one less game you have to play, which means one less opportunity to be upset, one less opportunity to have guys hurt. But if you're able to manage that first round and get out of it healthy, I think you do have an advantage going into round number 2 because you do have momentum. You are clicking versus a team that's still trying to get out of the gates early with having a bye. That long break, I think, did no favors to Oregon in this game. Again, not the reason they lost to Ohio State. Not at all. A reason, small reason, absolutely. You saw Ohio State win that game in dominant fashion. All right. Let's look at what was it? The Peach Bowl here. Texas taking out Arizona State in 2 overtimes. My biggest takeaway from this game is simple. Texas is not a national title contender. They have the talent to win a national championship this season. The reason why I don't think they will is because their offense is not consistent enough. And that's the reason why this game should have been a blowout. And instead, Texas nearly lost and got lucky to escape Arizona State. We'll give credit to the Sun Devils here in a little bit. But I think, again, I want to focus here on Texas first. When you look at how they started this game, up 14-0, a 2-play drive to score a touchdown. This happens far too often where Texas comes out of the gates quickly. Quinn Ewers looks good. This offense is firing. They get a few explosive plays in the pass game. They jump on you quick. 14-0. We're sitting there going, game over. Game over. But if you go back to my Twitter, I like to live tweet a lot of these things. So I'm not just making this up now in hindsight, I promise you. I never tweeted it until later on. When it was 14-0, a lot of people are saying, oh, game over. Texas is going to romp here. Another blowout in the playoff. I didn't tweet anything because I've seen this story before. Texas fans, you've seen this story before. And anyone who's watched Texas this year has seen this story before, where they can get off to a hot start. They feel like they are in complete control of the game. And then all of a sudden, what happens? The offense goes into a little bit of a lull. Quinn Ewers makes a bad decision or two, has a turnover, and all of a sudden, a game that was in full control 10 minutes ago is now all of a sudden a game. You're like, what the hell is going on here? Could Texas lose this game? They just had a vice grip on it. And now all of a sudden, here's in this case, Arizona State have a chance to win the game. They do this far too often, and they did not get burned by it this time. They did it against A&M, did not get burned by it. But we saw against Georgia. They got burned by it. They were not in total control like they were in this game. But again, the offense just is unable to get out of first or second gear for a large part of this game, to where all of a sudden you're sitting there going, how do they, can they beat a good team? And the answer is no. The answer is no. That punt return touchdown happened with 7 minutes to go in quarter number 1. 14-0, not even halfway through, or just over halfway through. Easy math there, Ryan. Just over halfway through the first quarter. They did not score another touchdown until Quinn Ewers had that quarterback run until the fourth quarter. And even though at that point we thought, okay, game over, it's 24-8, that was the kind of, dragging their feet a little bit, missed field goal here, not converting on third down there. All right, 24-8, game's over, fourth quarter. Texas is going to move on. And what happens? Arizona State marches down the field. Quinn Ewers throws an interception, and all of a sudden, here we go. Oh, Texas in a dogfight here. Now, with all the banging on Quinn Ewers, and again, you look at the stats, I think the stats are deceiving in this game because you look at it, it's like 20 of 30 for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. It looks pretty. But if you watch the game, it was anything but. Now, to his credit, he had the biggest throw of his career in that 4th down and 13 in overtime to keep Texas alive and send them into double overtime. That's a great throw. That's great protection and pick up the blitz. That's a great job by Ewers for recognizing double move. I got him, throwing it out there, making a great throw. Matthew Golden, great. One of the best receivers in college football, doing his thing. That was big time throw by Ewers. Ice in the veins. It felt like to me that game was over when you look at how that overtime possession was going, where they couldn't run the ball. Arizona State's flying all around the field. I thought for sure, okay, it's just a formality. 4th and 13, this game's over, no shot. Credit to Ewers, biggest throw of his career, by far. Hell of a time to have it. And then you saw, I think, the genius of Sark on that very next play. In second overtime, to have Gunnar Helm running down the seam for a touchdown. Quinn Ewers saved 2 of the biggest throws of his career for when Texas needed it most. He deserves a lot of credit for that. But with that said, again, if he's more consistent in the second and third quarters of this game, and even in the fourth quarter as well, doesn't have that pick, Texas is cruising to a victory. They don't need him to make those 2 throws in overtime to tie and eventually take the lead and win the game. And that's why when you look at Texas, I think their defense is the best defense left in the playoff. Ohio State can have an argument. I think they're 1A and 1B right there. I think they're both elite. So I trust Texas's defense a lot, despite, again, what we saw here late in the fourth quarter. But the reason why Texas, I just can't right now seeing even make this competitive against Ohio State is the fact that Quinn Ewers is just not consistent enough to keep Texas's offense either up with an opposing offense or put a team away. And that you just see it far too often here this season, where Texas comes out of the gate strong, goes through a lull, second quarter, third quarter, lets a team back in it, then has to make a play in the fourth quarter to win. Most times they've made plays in order to win, but it should never come down to that. And I think you're going to get burned. They got burned by Georgia twice in these games here in terms of not being able to make plays. And I think against Ohio State, they're going to absolutely get burned here. If Quinn Ewers has a similar performance as he did yesterday in the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State's going to roll. Now, I said I liked Texas's defense. And you could argue, right, 31 points. Cam Scatterbo was just a man possessed. I get it. The reason, though, why I'm not really getting too upset or worried about Texas's defense is because look at how long they're on the field for. Arizona State was on the field for 37 minutes of regulation, then obviously the 2 overtime possessions here as well. Texas's offense did their defense 0 favors. Again, that pick was brutal. They could not sustain drives, a few quick 3 and outs. When you're on the field almost, 2/3 of the time in regulation, you are going to get worn down. And credit to Arizona State, credit to Scatterbo as well, who's throwing up, who's just looked like he's absolutely gassed, looked like most of us on, honestly, New Year's Day hungover, just fighting for our lives out there, hoping to just survive. For me, needed a bacon, egg, and cheese yesterday morning to revive me back to life. Scatterbo, I guess, needed a ton of H2O and some IVs to get him back to life. But that's going to wear you down if you're Texas. And the most impressive part about Texas's defense is the bend but don't break aspect, where Arizona State plenty of times in that game drove the ball down the field, got inside the 20, and then what happened? Texas put the clamps down, forced them to field goal attempts, held them out of the end zone. Goal line stand there as well that I thought really was going to end the game right there when they tackled Scatterbo in 4th down and goal. Before the safety happened, I thought game over. Game over with how well Texas's defense played in the red zone. They got worn down. And for me, I put that more on the offense of Texas than I do the defense. But you look at Texas, they got the win. They're in the Final Four. They have the talent, no doubt about it. They have the talent to win a national title. To me, their offense is just not good enough, not consistent enough to get that done. That's why I don't feel very good about Texas, honestly, coming out of this game whatsoever. Now, before we go to the final game here, the Fiesta Bowl, we got to give Cam Scatterbo, all the credit in the world. This guy, he's so much fun. So much fun to watch, and truly is just a guy that is one of the most determined players in all of college football. Again, he is puking. He looks like he's out of gas. Every time he's tackled, it looks like his life is ending right there on the field with how slow he was to get up, how much he was laboring. 242 yards of total offense, which does not, by the way, include that 40-plus yard passing touchdown he had to get the Sun Devils back in the game. 2 total touchdowns, again, a passing touchdown as well. He was a man possessed. And early, I thought, boy, they in trouble. Because that Arizona State offensive line was getting worked by Texas's really good defensive line. Scatterbo's getting upset. Sam Levitt's getting upset. Credit to Kenny Dillingham. Because early, the body language was not very good. The success on offense was not very good. This could have gotten ugly quickly. And to Dillingham's credit, he never allowed the infighting or guys to turn on each other to the point where it just led to self-destruction. He kept those guys rallied again in the second half. They wore down Texas, one of the best defenses in all the country, wore them down and got it to a point where they were 1 4th and 13 stop away from making the college football playoff semifinals. Dillingham did a great job. Arizona State's not going anywhere. Sam Levitt, just a redshirt freshman. I think he'll be back, he'll be back in the sense of playing well and get Arizona State back on the stage soon. Dillingham is a very good coach. He's injected real life and belief into that program. There's nothing to me that screamed fluke about ASU this year. They're a legit team. I think they'll be back. They will be back in the playoffs sooner rather than later. This is going to be a fun, ascend to watch for the Sun Devils program. I know it's a frustrating end to the season for them and what should have been. They should have won the game. They blew it. 4th and 13, win the game. They had all the momentum on their side. Win the game. Couldn't get that one stop that mattered the most. But this program's going nowhere. All right, let's finish off at least the games played that we saw with what we saw on New Year's Eve. Penn State taking down Boise State 31-14. For me, the biggest takeaway is this. Penn State, I think, has proven so far in this playoff, they're the second most well-rounded team remaining outside of Ohio State. I think Penn State right now has, if you're telling me Ohio State does win the national title, I think the team that's beating them is Penn State. I think Penn State's really the only chance that everyone in college football has of preventing the Buckeyes from winning a national championship this year. Just because of how many ways Penn State can beat you. And you are seeing right now, a team that is really hitting their stride in the trenches. James Franklin, this is by far the best offensive and defensive lines he's ever had in his Penn State tenure, ever. And right now you are seeing it work its magic against two teams that statistically were some of the best in terms of controlling the line of scrimmage. Penn State came into this game, or I should say Boise State came into this game as a top 15 rush defense statistically. Now, again, we can get into who they played, blah, 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 but the numbers don't lie. Numbers said this was a top 15 rush defense. What did Penn State do in this game? Run for a cool 216 yards. And I think that the key that, and the biggest thing that leads to their explosiveness on the ground and why it's so hard to manage is not just the offensive line that is really playing again. They are clicking in all cylinders. They are playing their best football, I think, at any point any O-line has ever played under James Franklin. It's also the fact that they have thunder and lightning. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. Well, they have two different styles that wear you down equally. Where Katron Allen is, let's compare him to Ashton Jeanty and Cam Scadaboo, who just run you down, who wear you down, who lay the hammer, really, wear down this front line of whatever defensive line you're playing, wear down the linebackers. And Nick Singleton, who has power himself, but boy, does he also have the speed. And you saw that on that 60-yard touchdown run to really ice this game. You give him one crack, he makes one guy miss, he's gone. He's gone. And I think that touchdown run in large part was set up by the hammering of Allen early in this game. Both of them average over 7 yards per carry. They did the same thing against SMU, who again was a top 10 statistically rush defense. So you're seeing now Penn State against two run stuffing defenses have their way in the ground with them and win the game on the ground. And that is so tough to defend because I think Drew Allar, you can make an argument, is the best quarterback left in the playoff. And it's him or Will Howard for sure. And Allar can make plays, 3 passing touchdowns in this game, 2 to Tyler Warren, who again is one of the best players in all of college football. Put him anywhere, he's unguardable. I think you saw that in with both touchdown receptions, how tough of a guy he is to guard. You throw it up, he's coming down with it. There's no defensive back in college football that's going to be able to stop him when he's going up like that. And so when you are able to wear down defensive lines up front the way Penn State has done, and when you have Singleton and Allen ripping off 7 yards a pop, and all of a sudden now you're allowing play action and Drew Allar to sit back there with Warren, with guys like Amari Evans, Harrison Wallace making some big plays deep. Like this Penn State offense is going to be really difficult to stop no matter what defense you're facing. It is. They are so well-rounded. And by the way, just talking about the offense, the defense as well. Look at what they did in this game. Ashton Jeanty's been unstoppable. Ask Oregon. Forget how they played nobody. He ran for nearly 200 yards and 3 touchdowns against Oregon, the best team in the country's defense. He shredded. And you look at this game, Jeanty, season low in terms of rushing yards, just 104. Season low in terms of yards per carry, 3.5. And this was just his second game of the season without finding the end zone. And by the way, Penn State did this defensively for a large part of this game. I thought their best defender in Abdul Carter, who's one of the best defenders, you could argue the best defender in all of college football, was on the sideline for most of the game with looks like a shoulder injury. I hope he's okay. Penn State is going to need him, whether it's against Notre Dame, against Georgia. They need him. If they have any hope of winning a national title, they need Abdul Carter to be back healthy by next Thursday night. We'll see how that goes. As you can, at least if you checked already, Penn State, James Franklin, not exactly forthcoming when it comes to injury updates. So expect to hear nothing between now and next Thursday on the status of Carter. And basically, you have to wait till warm-ups to see if he's out there and playing. Fingers crossed. Penn State needs him for sure. But what a performance that defensive line especially had in containing Jeanty, minus the best defensive player in college football. Deni Dennis Sutton deserves a massive shout out. Amin Vanover, Zane Durant, we talked about Ohio State's defensive line and how dominant they have been. They have been by far the best front four, most disruptive in this playoff. Right behind was Penn State. What a great job they did in defending the power of Jeanty. They did a great job defending the speed of SMU the week prior. They are again clicking in all cylinders. Penn State, again, in the trenches, offensively and defensively, has set the tone in these two games to where Now, again, it's going to be a big test and by far the toughest test they have faced in Notre Dame or Georgia. When they played them, when they find out the winner later today, when they play them next week. Like, right, we're not going to sit here and pretend like, oh, they shut down Gentry. That means they can shut down Jeremiah Love. It's a different offensive line, different system, whole different set of circumstances you have to worry about if you're Penn State, whether it's Notre Dame or Georgia. But either way, I think if you're a Penn State fan, you have to feel very confident about their ability going into that game, no matter who they face, and being able to shut down that opposing offense. Penn State's playing well, man. Look, I'll be honest. For those that know, I don't have to say this, but for those who don't, maybe if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Appreciate it. Maybe subscribe to the channel. We'll be here doing a lot of these breakdowns and doing a lot more college football stuff between now and the national championship game. So please make sure you subscribe so you can be here with us as we do more of this, this more often here. But I'm a Penn State alum. So obviously, right, I'm very excited for Penn State and rooting for them. But I also try to be as realistic as possible because I'm not trying to be a homer. I think that doesn't I want to gain your trust. And how I gain your trust is by calling it as I see it. And I went into this playoff not calling Penn State a national title contender. I did not think they were good enough to beat Oregon. I did not think they were good enough to beat Ohio State. I just told you to start this podcast, right? Ohio State is by far the team to beat. And as long as they play the way they do, no one's beating them and no one's keeping it close. I stand by that. Stand by that. With that said, though, with how well Penn State's playing offensively, defensively, I do feel like this team is capable of winning a national championship. I expect them to be in the national championship game. I think whether it's whether it's Notre Dame or Georgia, I think Penn State can win that game. Should win that game, frankly. So once they get there, we'll see. Most likely we play Ohio State. Then again, we'll see how Ohio State plays. But I think right now, I don't think it's a hot take or hyperbole to say that Penn State can truly win a national championship. I think with how well they're playing, with how much they're dominating their opponents. So that's another thing. Like when you look at Texas, right? I get the path. Again, I'm trying to balance my emotions here, right? Of looking at how well Penn State's playing, but also taking into account, okay, they played SMU and Boise State, that if they were ranked not by the bye system, but ranked in the rankings, they are, again, two of the easier teams left in the field, right? So I'm also trying to be realistic and understand they're not doing this against Ohio State or Oregon or Georgia. It is an easier opponent. But with that said, I think Penn State's playing right now a brand of football and playing at a high level to where they could beat any team really outside of Ohio State right now. And so I think that they do deserve recognition because look at Texas. Right? Texas was the biggest favorite of any of these 4 games in the quarterfinal, and they had the closest call. Right? So, sure, Penn State they had an easy path. Again, we're not going to get crazy. They had the easiest path of any team you could argue going to the Final Four. But with that said, I think they also deserve credit for taking care of business because look at Texas, who I think you could argue had the second easiest path, Clemson, Arizona State. Well, that Clemson game at one point was a 7-point game, in the fourth quarter where you're saying, oh my God, can Clemson come back here and win the game? They were up 31-10 and almost blew it. And then against Arizona State, needed double overtime. And again, we're 4th and 13 step away from losing the game and going home. So Penn State, I think, deserves credit for taking care of business because you see, while yes, it is easier, teams like Texas really do struggle and did not make it a cakewalk whatsoever. So I think Penn State loved the way they're playing. They're very balanced offensively, defensively. I think they're absolutely capable of winning a national title this year. Finally, let's give you a quick preview here because obviously we still have one game to go. First and foremost, obviously thoughts, prayers with everyone out in New Orleans. Just a sickening, horrific terrorist attack that obviously we hope everyone is okay. We hope the feeling of safety, right, and normalcy can resume back there as much as quickly as possible. Obviously, terrorism is more about trying to get people unsafe and living in fear. And the biggest way to counteract that is by living your life again normally. So obviously hoping that, number one, everyone is obviously okay that was injured. Prayers to those who unfortunately lost their life in this, again, heinous act. And hopefully the spirit of New Orleans, the spirit of Bourbon Street returns sooner rather than later because that's how you truly win. So hoping that the party scene comes back quickly. Hopefully feelings of safety return here as quick as possible as well. When you look at this game between Notre Dame and Georgia, I think Notre Dame is winning this game. I think they're pulling off the quote-unquote Vegas upset because I think right now they are just a more well-rounded, better team. Look at it from Georgia's perspective first here. You have Gunnar Stockton making his first career start. Now, there's a lot of history, whether it's high school and you read anything about Gunnar Stockton's kind of upbringing. He was basically being bred for this moment. He started working out with a quarterback coach at age 6. So he's not exactly, you're not just pulling off a jag, right? Just another guy off the bench here to come in. This guy's talented. And again, I thought in the second half, that Georgia offense looked better than they did in the first half of Carson Beck. So while Stockton, I think, won't be the dead weight bringing them down, what concerns me for Georgia is the fact that Stockton will have no help around him. Because you look at Georgia, Georgia can't run the football. Think about this. Georgia, right? That has, a lineage of great offensive line play and great running backs. They are not even the best rushing team in their own state. Georgia State and Georgia Tech, but Georgia State averages more rushing yards per game than Georgia does. They cannot run the ball. Trevor Etienne is back, still dealing with those ribs, but he obviously had a big impact against Texas in the SEC title game. If Notre Dame can contain him, I don't see how Georgia wins this game because the run game, again, can't really take pressure off Stockton. So there's no balance, I think, offensively that can help Stockton out. And these receivers and tight ends can't catch the football. Georgia has some of the most drops in all of college football. So when you look at it offensively, I just don't see a path for them to succeed where Notre Dame is solid against stopping the run, and they have one of the best pass defenses in the country. So I think they'll be able to slow down this passing attack that's really been non-existent for most part of the year, take away this run game that has been a total zero this season. And I think Notre Dame, with their holy trinity of Jeremiah Love, Riley Leonard, Jadarian Price, each over 600 yards on the ground, I think Notre Dame can run their way to a semifinal appearance. I think they're good enough to run the ball down Georgia's throat and win a low-scoring close game. So give me Notre Dame here 23-17. I think they run the ball. They're the more physical team. Like this to me, I know Notre Dame, right, every year feels like, oh, this is the year. They're legit, and then they go out play a good team and get blown out. I'm 30 years old. This to me feels like the most legit Notre Dame team in my lifetime, where they are actually built to compete with some of the best teams in the country, where that run game is no fluke. That defense is no fluke. They have the speed, the physicality to keep up. The passing game leaves a lot to be desired. But I think they are good enough in the trenches to win this game, win a low-scoring game. Give me Notre Dame here, 23-17. They win the Sugar Bowl. They go face Penn State here in the Final Four with a chance to go to the national title game. And I think Notre Dame here pulls off the win, takes down Georgia. All right, appreciate you joining us. This has been a lot of fun breaking down the college football playoff for the last 45 minutes or so. If you're a first-time viewer, well, appreciate you taking some time here to join us. Make sure to subscribe. That's all I ask. It's free of charge. Subscribe to the channel. That way, anytime we go live or put out videos, you get updates and alerts on the newest content we do put out there for you. We will have Hicks 5-minute picks coming out early next week to get you set for both semifinal games. So make sure, again, you're on the lookout for that, plus also videos as well from shows that I do on the Infinity Sports Network that you can listen to Hick at night each and every Sunday night from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern. All over Odyssey Sports channels. If you just look up Infinity Sports Network or Hick at Night, night spelled Nite, you can find that show right there. So appreciate you tuning in. If you are watching this on the replay, comment live or comment in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts here about what we're talking about. Is Ohio State head and shoulders the best team in college football right now? Are they the favorites to win the national title? Who has the best chance of knocking them off? And if you want to get a little Notre Dame-Georgia prediction in here before the game starts in a few hours as well, I want to hear it. I'll be in the comments going back and forth with you as well. So thank you again for joining us. Enjoy the game today. We'll talk to you soon right here on the Ryan Hickey YouTube channel.